Welcome back to Alyssa's Movie Takes. This is going to be take 2 with episode 5 of season 2 of The Chosen. Why? Because it's stirring up a lot of controversy. I watched Dallas's live and he was so passionate about certain things. He also responded directly to my post on this channel and was passionate about this isn't the character of Jesus. Can you wait till episode 6? But with what he said in the live, which was after he posted here, I want to address and basically have a debate with Dallas in what he said, but mostly I'm having a debate between my heart and my head. Because my heart and my head are wrestling, it's going to come out as more of a debate between what's going on inside me and maybe some of you too. Dallas, if you would rather have this discussion more back and forth, so I'm not just reading your points, I would love to set that up with you after episode 6 comes out. I also want to talk with you about the presence of God. This is what this whole debate is about anyway, of where the presence of God has been in The Chosen in the production of it since the beginning. So if you want to do that with me, let me know. So where my heart is coming from is I'm coming at this as someone who's a trauma survivor, a sexual assault survivor. And I say survivor in this case because I am healed. I have survived it. I have overcome it. But I'm still not immune to all triggers. This triggered certain things to rise up in me with passion and say, Jesus would never have abandoned her. You know, I was talking to a friend about it and I'm passionate and I know that if I were friends with Dallas in person, I'd be like, you can't write it that way. He would never abandon her. You know, like all those things that are coming up. And Dallas's passion is coming up over, yes, she would walk away because people slide all the time. You know, his passion is coming up. So it's stirring up a lot of things. Like, I think it's supposed to. So my head is coming at this from somewhere completely different. My head is coming at this from someone who walking away with Jesus healing completely in my heart and in my head, healing my broken brain, healing my broken heart. I became a Celebrate Recovery trainer, which means I teach other people how to walk people through their hardest moments of their life, to deal with these hard moments in their past. And my head is going, okay, there's a lot of your points, Dallas, that are valid. But I can't separate those two things without sort of talking it through. So this is the point of this video, is to talk it through. And I know that none of this is really going to be settled until we see episode 6. But I think having the wrestling here before we see the resolution is a good thing for you guys too. Like, maybe some of this wrestling is going on with you, but we have 4 or 5 weeks to wait with all this stuff turned up. And I think God is doing a good thing and allowing us to bring our pain to him and ask him the tough question of, where were you in that moment? What were you doing in that moment? How can I trust you when you let this happen to me? How can I trust you when you didn't seem to show up for me when I needed you the most? Okay, these are hard questions. And I'm guessing that this 5 or 6 week period between the release of episode 5 and the release of episode 6, God, not The Chosen, but God through The Chosen and God with the help of The Chosen is trying to get us to a point where we can release a lot of this. And the best way for me to do this is through this debate between my head and my heart. But let's start out with this debate of what Dallas said in his first point. He starts off by thanking me. He starts off by thanking me for my story. And then he says this: I always appreciate healthy dialogue about these issues, but just to clear up a couple things. I do not portray Mary as a prostitute in our show. Minor point. Here's a fun issue. I thought she was portrayed like that. He calls it Red Quarter. There's a man running from her room when we first meet her with the demons. There's demons, they live in her. And she bares her head in this episode, which I think was a sign of being a prostitute. Jesus says she has known the worst kind of men in her life. There's a lot that I thought hinted that she was heavily portrayed as a prostitute, but Dallas wasn't intending that. So there you go. That's basically the gist of this debate is I'm thinking something, he's thinking something else. I'm an audience member, he's the writer. Guess what? That happens, you know? And especially when you're starting with script to film it, to edit it, I think we're the test case, especially because we're clamoring as the audience to get these episodes to us as quickly as possible. And we're basically like screeners. When you watch it live, we're like screening audiences, you know? We're kind of giving him feedback of things that he does tweak when he gets not positive feedback. I'll say feedback said without anger. And mine, I tried to say without anger. And sometimes it's not going to come across as he intends. And he listens and he tries to get it better. I think he's improved in season 2 and able to communicate that message. And this is a 2-part episode. It's tricky. So Point 2. Jesus did in fact address Mary's situation. He told Rhema to go check on her. All right, so here's where you're going to get the debate between my heart and the debate between my head. My head says he sends Rhema in his stead. Okay, Rhema helped her earlier that day. There were a lot of things going on in that moment, and because he's one person on earth at that time, he has limited capacity in who he can help in that one moment. But my heart says it plays like Jesus had compassion for John, who's heading into trouble, Simon the Zealot, who's confused about Jesus as Messiah, even Caleb, who was possessed, this demoniac who's now free. It looked like he had compassion for him, but it looked like he lacked compassion for Mary. And if he's going to send Rhema, he could have explained with compassion or gentleness or expressed more compassion to both Rhema and Mary. And Dallas addressed this in his live, that he's going to tweak this. The Rhema Mary scene is off screen, so we don't get to see their interaction. And he thought, I need to change that. I'm going to add something in post to change that. Maybe that will solve it. Maybe it's just an interaction that says Mary's not taking help at this moment, because part of my issue is, well, she's freaking out. She's the one who was possessed before. This guy comes into their camp, calls her out by her old name. She's freaking out, and Jesus isn't even like taking care of that piece of it. You know, it looks like she's being ignored by someone who knows actually what's going on with her in that moment, and maybe she runs because of that. Why does she run? We're going to get to that. From the setup, so this was the off-screen, sort of the criticism of it being off-screen. From the setup, Mary's going off to have a panic attack. That's what it looks like, because everything in her is triggered. Everything in her from her old life is stirred up, and she's going to go off where people can't see her, and that trauma logic and fight or flight or freeze reflexes is going to start to control her as much as those demons ever did. It's not demonic, it's mental health, and it's starting to take over, because that panic is like, taking control of your mind, controlling your actions just as much as a demon ever did. Okay, that's my impression, but I think it's backed up with how you see Mary going off. The way that she goes off, it looks like she needs to go have a panic attack, and in that case, I think somebody should be rescuing her, knowing what she's going through. Rescuing her as in, you're not in control of yourself right now. You're not possessed, but that panic is going to make you make some bad decisions. All right, so if Jesus had gone, Jesus is the ultimate trauma coach. Again, speaking from experience, if he had gone, he may have been able to help Mary's heart have its day, so she didn't back up in the depths. That's what my heart's saying. That's the more minor of these 2 points, okay? So Dallas's response is longer in this one, so bear with me, and I'll pause as I say certain things. When writing what Jesus would do in a particular situation, and when assessing God's character in any situation, it is a matter of priorities, for lack of a better term. You believe Jesus would put being present with Mary in that moment as the number one priority in helping her, that when she walked into the woods, Jesus would have stopped what he was doing and chased her into the woods, because he believed his presence and hand-holding in that moment would have been the best thing for her. That's certainly not at all a bad or wrong perspective. It's possible for sure. Okay, so Dallas is being respectful to me. I'm trying to be respectful to him in my video, and he's being respectful to me in his response. Let's just keep that in mind for later when we talk about this. But what if Jesus didn't believe that was the best thing for her? Because Jesus, whether in his earthly form or in heaven, sees things on a larger perspective in terms of what's best, and sees things on a longer or even eternal perspective in terms of timing. What if that looked different than what we'd expect in this case? What if Jesus believed Mary needed to go through something alone and be allowed to make some bad choices? And what if he has plans for others in the group as well to participate in this journey? For instance, Rhema checking on her assignment in Matthew, finding her with a hint from Jesus to Matthew. You may not believe that any of that would fit into the character of Jesus, and that's fair. I just happen to disagree in this case. I'm a parent, and I've done things that on the surface may have appeared cruel and unhelpful to my kids. But I have a different perspective in mind and believed what was best for them would be to allow them to experience something painful. So point 3, I'm going to start with my heart, because I can calm down that heart and say, sit down, listen, calm down. And then I can end by giving Dallas and his team the full benefit of the doubt with my trainer, longtime Christian head. Okay? This is not completely settled, as I said. It's going to continue to kind of swirl around. But I think that Dallas and I are not far off here. My heart says that Jesus picked sermon prep over going to look for a vulnerable woman in his care. And that looks like a hard choice to recover from, even if he had a deeper plan in mind. For the second time that day, he passes Mary off to someone else. Jesus passes Mary off to someone else. For a trauma victim, this compounds the first time, which by itself probably would have been understandable since there were so many people clamoring for his attention right then. And being passed off in your weakest or most vulnerable moments is a horrible feeling. What's hardest here, Dallas, and you wrestle with this, you said it in your live, is how do you portray this? Jesus is human and he's God. And yet Jesus on earth, did he have limitations? I'm in your camp, Dallas. I don't think he could bench press 2,000 pounds. I think he had limitations. So here's the limitations and what those limitations came across as in the show. But I think it's tweaks. Jesus in person on earth is the disciples' picture of God. God the Father, still there with Mary. God the Spirit, okay, in theory, we don't know. Maybe was he on earth yet? But we'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say he was still there with Mary. God the Son, the only way that Mary truly knows God. Hard for Jesus to say, I was with you when he was elsewhere doing other things. Whew. My head says to your points about Jesus with an eternal perspective, allowing these characters to learn and grow, and Mary the freedom to make bad choices. Yes, that's where it's very valid. Rabbi Jesus, the ultimate trainer, needs to make sure his people, his followers, his students are equipped. He teaches them by letting them try. He lets Rama have the experience of trying to console Mary, even though she's not fully trained. The same is true for Simon and Matthew, to which the audience is going like weird pair to send. Then you think about it, and I thought about it. I'll say I thought about it. Matthew has shown compassion and that he wants to protect Mary in this episode. Simon, who's outspoken, hot-headed, unkind sometimes, still proves to be the leader and notices first who's missing. Mary's missing, and that it's worth telling Jesus about. And hopefully, even though they seem like complete opposites and no friend of each other's, that they'll balance each other out. Matthew will keep Simon from getting violent, and Simon will keep Matthew from shutting down in a crowded, off-color setting. On letting Mary fall. Okay, so this is the second part of this discussion. This is longer than I would have thought. On letting Mary have the freedom to fall. Okay, I can see it. One of the early things that we teach our Celebrate Recovery trainers is that when something starts to hit too close to home of that pain from their past, people are going to run away. And you can't chase them. The way we say this that's quippy is runners run, and you can't want it more than they do. Looks like Dallas, you wrote this as Mary runs, Jesus lets her. We'll see what happens in episode 6. The passion that I've seen from comments, the passion that I see in Dallas, my passion in this, we're all kind of hitting around the same issue. Why did Mary run? My first argument in my first video, and I'm still somewhat making it, I'm wrestling with it, is she ran because Jesus didn't help her through her first wave of trauma, didn't come to her rescue right then because her mind wasn't in the right place. She wasn't making sound decisions. And had he talked her down or had he intervened, done an intervention in that moment, she might not have ended up back up in the depths. Some people are saying, no, this is because she was possessed again. I don't see that. I don't see that she was possessed again. I might see it as that man, Caleb, came into the camp fully possessed, and his demons recognized her as Lilith. And she might have been, I'm going back to somewhere safe, where I feel comfortable, because even in the camp of Jesus, I'm not safe from these demons. They still know who I am. They can still find me. That's a big piece of this, I think. But then there's also the option that she wouldn't run away and she wouldn't backslide. I agree with Dallas that she can backslide, like she can fall. I think the audience, just in general, we're all kind of confused as to why. Why did she run? Did she run because of neglect? Did she run because of demons? Did she run because her past is stirred up and she feels safer elsewhere? It's unclear in the episode. Maybe it's intentionally unclear, but Dallas said, I wish I'd put the Rama Mary conversation on screen, because she goes back to the camp in the morning. Why doesn't she go back to the camp the second time when she sees the Roman soldier? She smiles, and that's confusing. And confusing because It looked like she was so not okay when she left the camp to go be by herself. Did she find some weird confidence again when she's walking in a way that she feels that more woman of the world? I'm going to fight for myself now. I can be okay because I'm going to do this myself. It's not clear. Maybe it's intentionally vague there, but it's not clear as to why Mary left. And so when people are saying, no, she wouldn't have left, it's probably more because they don't understand the lead up to it. And Dallas sees that. He sees that the lead up to Mary leaving is confusing. And even if it's answered in the next episode, it leaves people going, what? I don't get it. Why would she leave? Because she went back to the camp earlier, because Raymond goes to talk to her, but we don't see it. And so these are tweaks. These are tweaks, whether it's making Jesus slightly more compassionate or understanding that he knows what he's doing, that he has tried everything to help keep her here. Why does Mary leave is the key question of this episode. There is so much going on. Simon is joining the group. Caleb is getting freed. John the Baptist and Jesus are having this first conversation and then last conversation. And they have to kind of joke with each other, and Jesus has to grieve the fact that he's leaving and never going to see him again because he knows what's about to come. And then on top of that, the other B story is the Pharisees. They're starting to process what happened with Jesse and starting to make a more formal inquiry. So there's a lot going on in this show. And the why Mary leaves feels like it falls through the cracks. And that is why, for me, my initial thought was, it's because of Jesus. He didn't pay attention to her. He passed her off twice. That was my initial reaction. I still think it needs a little more explaining to say the good shepherd isn't going after the lost sheep. That doesn't go with what he said earlier in the parable in season 2. Why? So there's an uncertainty about the why. And this uncertainty, and Dallas gets to have the benefit of having read the second script for season 2, episode 6. We have to kind of wrestle with these questions. And not because we're wrestling with this fictional show, but because we're wrestling with our own issues and our own deep questions about how God would respond in a certain situation. That's very dramatic. One last point. I disagreed with Dallas. I said that certain things about this episode were written poorly. Maybe that's worse than calling him a heretic to a writer because he did actually respond to me. But people are calling him a heretic. People get on the lives and tell him he looks tired. People are calling him a cult leader. People are calling him all these names from the Christian side of things. And I want to ask us, please stop. Stop calling him names. This is ridiculous. He's making amazing content. If I disagree with him on occasion, it's because I like to analyze things, and people give me their stuff to edit all the time, and I just look at it and I go, okay, this works, this doesn't work, let's try this. And if I were on his team, I'd be giving him that same feedback, but I'm an end user, so I'm giving him end user feedback, and apparently he's watching it. But I disagreed with him in this portrayal, but I'm not calling him names. I'm not saying he's a blasphemer. We have to stop eating our own. Christians are really, really good at eating our own. And I want to give you this verse from John, from 1 John. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God. He who loves not knows not God, because God is love. We need to be guided in love. I'm guided by this because I love Jesus, and I want to see him portrayed really well on screen. And Dallas's response says he loves Jesus and wants to portray him really well on screen. And even if we disagree, it's because we're trying to wrestle with our own pictures and understanding and who Jesus is. And that's a good purpose of this show, okay? Be kind to Dallas. I want to have more great Christian content. I don't want to see other people scared off because Dallas, who was kind of leading the charge here, got so beat up in the process that nobody else wants to try because they don't want to feel that either. So, be kind to Dallas. I know that this might also get some angry comments here, but feel free to disagree with me. Again, I don't even know where I'm landing with this because I'm wrestling with my head and my heart. It's not really landing anywhere. It's like, okay, let's see what happens in episode 6. But that should be a good thing, right? I really appreciate all your feedback on the last video. I'm exactly where I want it to be, like sort of a 50-50 thing, that at least it's raising some questions. And I will walk back that it's poorly written and simply say, I think it comes across in a way that wasn't intended. Just the same way that it comes across to me that Mary's in prostitution when Dallas didn't write it that way. This is the nature of visual media. You have to kind of do the best you can to get it across to the audience, but sometimes it comes across the audience differently than what you intended. This is like English Lit 101, right, guys? Like, this is what happens for all of eternity. We're never sure exactly how to interpret it. What's different with The Chosen is that Dallas will get on Facebook or YouTube and tell us exactly what he was thinking. The reason why I'm bringing this up in this video is because if you're just looking at it as the final product without Dallas's explanation, it's confusing. It looks cruel. With Dallas's explanation, which we're blessed to get, it makes a little more sense, but I'm still wrestling with it. And the feedback that I'm providing is so that maybe he and the other writers who are taking input from other people too can say, okay, the audience didn't quite get this. How can we say this better? How can we show this better? They're taking that feedback, they're putting it into action. And as long as we're kind with our feedback, even if we disagree or even if we're critical, I think he's really a good listener. And I think this show is just going to get better and better. I'll see you again for a review in episode 6, but I do have some other video ideas in the meantime. Thank you. And I'll talk to you soon.